Hi everyone, in this tutorial we're gonna dive into Substance and we're gonna create few trail textures there. So as you can see here, I've got this melee fist attack, and after the fist there is a trail that is actually a ribbon. So let me isolate those for you so you can actually see, because I've got two trails. The one is a very quick and glowing one, and the other one is as a background trail that just stays there for a little bit longer. Okay, so you might find those useful in your effect. So let's dive into Substance and create those very basic trail textures. Okay, so I'm gonna start with pellet noise, and feel free to experiment with different noises because you're probably gonna get very different results. It depends on noise you're gonna use. So I'd encourage you to try different ones, see which one gives you the results that you want, and yeah, go from there. But I'm gonna start with pellet noise, gonna reduce the scale of it, run it through cross section, and I noticed that cross section for some reason is not available in all Substance versions, so you might want to try to get different versions if you can't see the cross section, and hopefully in one of those it will be there. So I'm using the Steam edition of Substance, so hopefully you got that node in your software. And in here I'm just gonna change it to gradient mirrored. I'm gonna isolate it with the histogram scan, so I could get just a line, something like this, and I'm gonna play with the pellet noise disorder. Okay, also under cross section you have this coordinate, and you can play with those as well. All right, so I'm going for something like this. Next I'm just gonna use a bevel. I'm gonna use the minus values here. And next I'm gonna use a non-uniform directional warp grayscale. And I'm gonna get another pellet noise here. I'm gonna plug it into the intensity input. Obviously the scale of the pellet noise is way too high for me, so I'm just gonna maybe reduce it to 9. And in here now I can play with the intensity, maybe 50. As you can see, we could get a slightly different results if we modify various options in that node. Feel free to experiment with those as well, just to see if it's gonna give you the results that you want. So maybe I'm gonna go with max. I'm gonna change the degree, or at least gonna try to see what that does. Alright, so I'm just gonna go with a 0. You can play with the intensity so you get a nice blur from it. And once I got this, I'm gonna add maybe a multi-directional warp grayscale next, and I'm gonna plug in exactly the same pellet noise into the intensity input, just to get a bit more warp into that texture. For the most, I'm just gonna try a different one just to see which one works best for me. And I think min gives me really good results, so I'm just gonna maybe put intensity up to 30, because I want just a slight warp there, and directions I'm gonna maybe go with 2. And I quite like this sort of trail, so I'm just gonna keep going. Right, so I've got this. Next, maybe I'm just gonna add another warp. Or actually, let's try something else. I'm gonna copy this pellet noise, get it here, but I'm gonna reduce the scale of it to something lower, like 5. I'm gonna change the disorder of it and plug it into this one. and into that warp as well. I'm gonna try a higher value like 5. And for the warp, I'm gonna go for a low value, maybe of 4. I'm gonna come back to this one and check what it does actually if we're gonna get a slightly lower scale of the pedaling noise. So feel free to experiment with those. As you can see, that one gives us quite good results here. But I think I kind of like the softer shape, so I'm just gonna plug that pedaling noise there. And next I'm just gonna use blend, and I kind of want to I would like to see a bit more glow around it. So I'm just gonna run it through a blur, plug it back into that blend, set it maybe to max, and increase the value of the intensity maybe to 30. Change the quality to 1 just in case. And now in here I've got this opacity, so as you can see I can modify how much of this glow around that trail I want. So maybe 0.5 seems like a good value. And once I have this, I can just run it through auto levels, and I'm gonna create a gradient as well, just to preview how it might look once we add some colors to it. So I'm gonna select this pin, change it maybe to orange, and here I'm just gonna maybe try to get a red color. I'm gonna push those values a little bit so I get a bit more orange color there, and maybe here I'm gonna add a bit more intense yellow color as well. If you want a bit more glow, you can go back to your blend and maybe modify the opacity values. That's the one way. The other way would be to maybe add glow here, change the color maybe to orange, and just play with those settings. So as you can see, we're getting a slight glow there. However, now you probably have to export it with the colors. However, I like to export from this node, because I'll be adding colors in the game engine rather than in Substance. Alright, so that's one of the trails, and another one, I actually don't want to start from the beginning, so I'm just gonna grab maybe those here, move it up a bit, select this one, and I'm gonna change the coordinates slightly, because I'm going for a slightly different style this time. So that one will be a little bit more flat rather than going from side to side. I want to make this a little bit thicker as well, and on the bevel I'll need to go slightly more onto the minus values. Next, I'm just gonna use warp, and I'm gonna grab another pedaling noise here with a scale of 10. Here I'm just gonna maybe try to increase it to 4, and obviously that's way too much. So just before it starts breaking, I'm just gonna stop. So 1.5 seems like a good value here. And next I'm gonna use the same nodes that we've been using for the previous trail. That will be multi-directional warp grayscale. I'm gonna copy that pedaling noise, paste it. I'm gonna change a couple values here. Whoops, like the disorder maybe. Gonna hop back in here, try to maybe go for higher values like 50, just to see what it does. And for the directions, I don't think that force gives me really good results. I'm gonna go with 2, and I'm gonna try different settings to see which one looks best. And I think here the average gives me the best results. So I'm gonna stick to it. Actually, direction, I'm gonna change it to 1. So I quite like this line rather than having couple or 2 of those. So I'm just gonna go with one direction. Okay, and next I would like to add the glow to it. So I'm gonna go with blur. I'm gonna use blend to put this back into our main texture using the max options. I'm gonna increase the intensity, maybe to, I'm gonna start with 50. I think it might be a little bit too much for the glow, but now we can just go back here and modify how much of that glow around we want. So maybe 0.4. And next I'm just gonna use gradient. So instead of creating a new one, I'm just gonna copy those 2 gradients, paste it here, just to see how it behaves. And I quite like how what it does to the texture. So you have this line in the middle and it's very intense, and then we having like a really nice fade outwards. The only issue you might be having is that this and here, those are like a very harsh edges. So it might be a good idea maybe to blur it a little bit. However, we're gonna use the intensity of those lines. So maybe you need to blur it through the mask, or maybe just add slight blue, but I think it kind of looks cool. Oops. It kind of looks cool and intense with that line. So I'm just gonna keep it as it is, and I'm gonna export that texture into the engine. So that might be like a very intense and very emissive trail, especially at the beginning. And then we could use that one maybe as a background trail in your effects. Alright, so this was a very short tutorial how to create like very basic trails using only those nodes. I'm pretty sure that you could create a much better one if you're just gonna keep adding nodes here and going for a bit more stylized look. You can probably subtract some shapes from it as well, and just to add a little bit more details to it. But I just need those 2 to be fairly basic, and just want to give you an idea how to make those with a very short graph in Substance. So I hope you enjoyed this one, and see you in the next one.